Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Bidemi Shemoye, and welcome to the third lecture on sustainable development. You remember in our first lecture, we talked about the concept of economic development and economic growth. In our second lecture, we talked about or we discussed about comparative economic development, which looked into the characteristics of developing economies. And today, we'll be taking a look at sustainable development. Don't forget to share this course with your students, all right, so they can learn from it. And also, I will be so happy if you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Let's start. Let's dive straight in. So, what is sustainable development? According to the Brundtland report, sustainable development can be defined as meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generations. In my explanation, I said this means that the way society carries out its economic activities should not destroy the environment. Now, what are economic activities? Economic activities in terms of production and consumption of goods and services and the way natural resources are exploited. And that's why you can find in the Sustainable Development Goals uh, about responsible production and consumption. The reason why we have that is so that we can create a safer environment for everyone or for living species. Now, let's take a look at the objectives of sustainable development. All right, sustainable development aims to create sustainable improvements in the quality of life for all people. You see that? In the quality of life for all people. You remember when we talked about what is economic development? We mentioned and we stated that economic development has to do with people, the development of people, improving the quality of life of people. And so, sustainable development also, the aim or the goal of the objective of sustainable development should be to create sustainable improvements in the quality of life for people. I further said this should be the principal objective of development policies. All right. So, development policy should be aimed at creating sustainable improvements in the quality of life for all people. How can people's quality of life be improved? Oh, you already know that, okay, through economic growth, provision of basic amenities, and ensuring people can access quality education and good healthcare facilities. Now, what is the second objective of sustainable development? Sustainable development aims to maximize the net benefits of development, subject to maintaining the stock of all environmental and natural resource assets. Okay, those environmental and natural resource assets can be physical, can be human, or can be natural. Okay, the net benefit of development refers to the overall positive value or gain that results from a development. In simpler terms, it is the difference between the total benefits, such as economic growth. Of course, we know economic growth benefits the society at large. Improved infrastructure is also a benefit. Job creation is also a benefit. Environmental gains are also benefits, or enhanced quality of life. Those are benefits. And the total cost, which are financial expenses, okay, or financial expenditures, environmental degradation, social displacement, or long-term risk. All right. So net benefit is the difference between the total benefit, which we just mentioned, and the total cost, which you can also see on your screen. Now, let us take a look at some of the environmental problems that, as a global economy, that we struggle with. Okay, what are some of the problems, environmental problems that we struggle with? Number one is air pollution. Air pollution refers to the contamination of the air by harmful substances, which can be natural or human made, affecting both human health and the environment. It occurs when pollutants are released into the atmosphere in amounts that exceed natural levels, making the air harmful to breathe and damaging ecosystems. Major causes of air pollution include industrial emissions, which comes from factories, power plants, and industrial processes, which release pollutants such as sulfur dioxide, SO2, nitrogen oxide, and also air pollution is caused by vehicle emissions from cars, trucks, buses, and motorcycles, which emit pollutants such as carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane emissions. All right. So the reason why we are also concerned about air pollution is because of the impact it has on people. So while discussing anything related to sustainable development, economic development, you must take a look at it from the impact it has on the ecosystem. Okay, the ecosystem would include, we're going to talk about the impact it has on individuals, the impact it has on animals, other living species, the impact it has on the kind of uh, imbalances it can create. So we are concerned about the negative impact of air pollution on we human beings. All right. That's why there are policies that are constantly coming out to say, hey, why can't we use renewable energy as a source of energy or renewable energy sources as a source of energy to be able to create a sustainability in our method of production? All right. Another one is water pollution. All right. The main source of water pollution includes flushing waste down the domestic sewage, industrial effluents. And what are industrial effluents? Industrial effluent is the wastewater generated from industrial activities. We also have um, waste of chemicals, heavy metals, and mining activities. Sewage waste and industrial effluents flow into lakes, canals, rivers, coastal areas, and underground water sources. Since they are untreated, they endanger aquatic resources like fish and other water creatures. The polluted and untreated water causes waterborne diseases like diarrhea, hepatitis, and trachoma. You see again the impact of water pollution on living species. All right. So, and that's why we have to address this problems, these environmental problems. We also have solid and hazardous waste. The solid waste also create air and water pollution in urban areas. All right. Unregulated urban growth. And quickly, I want to say that not just in urban areas, in rural areas that are not developed, in rural areas where the government does not have regulations uh, guiding their activities, or the community leaders don't have regulation guiding the affairs of that community, you can also have uh, um, solid and hazardous waste creating environmental pollution. Okay, so not just in urban areas. The reason why we mention urban areas is as a result of congestion. Okay, we know about the concept of rural urban migration. People move from rural areas to urban areas because of the kind of benefits they get from there. And that puts a lot of pressure on the urban infrastructure or the urban resources. Okay, you can have a situation where the population in urban areas will be more than the available resources to maintain that urban area. All right. So you can also have issue of pollution in rural areas, not just urban areas. So unregulated urban growth without facilities for collecting, transporting, treating, and disposing of solid waste pollutes the atmosphere and water resources. Rotten garbage and blocked drains spread communicable disease and pollute groundwater resources. And so that's why you see in developed countries or in some developing countries, they take solid and hazardous waste very, very serious. Okay? Because it can easily people can easily get sick from dustbins that are or dustbins or trashes that are being thrown around. All right. So it is not acceptable in a country that waste or hazardous waste or trash or dustbins should be littered around or dirt should be littered around. That's not unhealthy. That environment would not be healthy for people to live. Okay, it's not acceptable. All right. So another environmental problem that we have is the issue of deforestation. This issue might be prevalent in developing countries. Okay, not all developing countries, but developed countries and some developed countries are beginning to understand the importance of trees, the importance of ensuring that we do not lose biodiversity. Okay, the trees have the role they play in the environment. Okay, and so let's take a look at it. Deforestation is the large-scale removal or clearing of forests, where trees are cut down or destroyed, often permanently, to make the land available for other uses, such as agriculture, urbanization, infrastructure development, or mining. Of course, there are legitimate reasons why countries will do this or allocate the land for this to be done. But you should not find that in a country you don't have trees that tends to preserve the environment. Okay, they should be cultivated because they have an impact on we human beings. Okay, they also have an impact on the quality of air. All right, they also get to prevent emissions. Okay, so deforestation leads to loss of biodiversity, endangers countless plant and animal species, and climate change. Trees act as carbon sinks, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. When forests are cleared or burned, the stored carbon is released back into the atmosphere, contributing to global warming. Okay, so deforestation also leads to soil erosion. Trees play a crucial role in maintaining soil structure by preventing erosion. Without tree roots to anchor the soil, deforested areas are more prone to soil erosion, nutrient depletion, and desertification. The deforestation also has economic impact. While deforestation may provide short-term economic gains through agriculture or logging, the long-term environmental damage can lead to losses in ecosystem services, such as clean water, fertile soil, and reduced agricultural productivity. So another example of environmental problems that we have is the loss of biodiversity. Okay, biodiversity is found in forests, grasslands, mountains, wetlands, deserts, and marine ecosystems. Economic growth leading to expansion of agriculture, reckless exploitation of forest and mineral wealth, and development of projects in biodiversity areas has led to the destruction of habitats. Consequently, there has been extinction of plant, animal, and microbiological species and loss of generic resources. So we must be very careful. That's why I mentioned when we define the concept of sustainable development, we must be very careful about how we go about our economic activities in terms of the production of goods and services, in terms of the consumption of those goods and services. So it's something we have to be intentional about as individuals, as a society, or as a global economy at large. Also, we've talked about a soil degradation that arises as a result of deforestation. Soil degradation is caused by water and wind. Soil erosion in hilly areas is caused by rain and rivers, thereby leading to landslides and floods. Deforestation, overgrazing, and steppe farming in hilly areas further causes soil erosion. Floods in rivers and plains cause soil erosion. Waterlogging on irrigated lands and intensive agriculture lead to salinization and soil degradation. So what are some of the causes of environmental degradation? A population growth. Okay, let's see how population growth leads to environmental degradation. Population growth without a commensurate or a step further increase in the necessary resources needed by the people of a country to thrive leads to increased pressure on the use of a country's resources, which leads to air and water pollution, through increased industrial activities, urbanization, and higher consumption patterns generate more waste and emissions. It also leads to loss of biodiversity. As land is cleared for housing, agriculture, and industrial expansion, natural habitats are destroyed, leading to extinction of plant and animal species. It also leads to soil degradation, intensive farming, deforestation, and improper land use practices to meet the growing food needs of a larger population lead to soil degradation. And so, what the government must do, or what policymakers must do, or what stakeholders must do, is I usually recommend population management. Or if a country knows that the population will keep increasing, then what you need to do is to ensure that, first of all, the country needs to engage in the production of goods and services. And not just that, the country needs to engage in the sustainable production of goods and services. The way at which the country carry out its activity must be sustainable. It must contribute to environmental quality. It must contribute to, or we say, ecological quality, or ecological improvement, or environmental improvement. So I mean, the population of a country can keep growing. All right, you can have an increase in population. All right, but if a country notices that the graph will keep going upward, then what that means is that sustainable production of goods and services must be encouraged. So poverty. So here I wrote, poverty and environmental degradation have a bidirectional relationship. This means that poverty can lead to environmental degradation, and environmental degradation can also lead to poverty. How? Poverty encourages unsustainability practices because the poor use and deplete natural resources for their survival, such as forests for firewood, land for subsistence farming, and water bodies for fishing. On the other hand, environmental degradation leads to poverty due to loss of livelihoods because they depend on natural resources for their income, e.g., fishing, agriculture, forestry. And the destruction of this livelihood is caused by vulnerability and climate shock, such as floods, droughts, and storms. In fact, I know there have been existing studies on poverty and environmental degradation. If you are a PhD student, if you're a master's student, or you're someone who is keen about research, you can further dive into the relationship between poverty and environmental degradation, taking a look at new econometric methods, or new scientific methods, or taking a look at countries that have not been thoroughly investigated, or taking a look at using a panel data, a group of selected countries. But it's good for empirical investigation, the relationship between poverty and environmental degradation. You get to find if there is a bidirectional relationship between them. So another cause of environmental degradation is industrialization. Industrialization causes air pollution, water pollution, soil contamination, and noise pollution, which can have a significant negative impact on human health and wildlife behavior. Industrialization also requires vast amounts of land for factories, mining operations, and infrastructure development, such as roads and railway. As a result, this leads to deforestation. Now, so, like I said, industrialization is a good thing. Creating industries is good, all right, because that tends to create jobs, okay, and that tends to improve the living standard of people, and that tends to also contribute to economic growth, and that tends to also contribute to economic progress. However, industrialization practices must be done in a more sustainable way, in such a way that it contributes to environmental quality. Transport development. Developing countries are developing their transport for trade and commerce. However, this is also leading to environmental degradation, such as air, noise, and sea pollution. The development of ports and harbors has led to oil spills from ships and adversely affected fisheries, coral reefs, mangroves, and the landscape. Another cause of environmental degradation, urbanization. Rapid and unplanned urbanization has led to the degradation of urban environment. Slums and shanty towns pollute air and water, and the generation of solid and hazardous waste has contributed to environmental degradation on a vast scale. Market failure. Okay, so what does it mean when we say market failure? Market failure means poor functioning of markets for environmental goods and services. It reflects the failure of government policy to remove market distraction caused by different factors. When there is market failure, societal or social welfare is not maximized. Market failure creates imperfect market. So in an imperfect market, you won't have an equilibrium. Okay, you wouldn't have an equilibrium as regards consumer surplus or producer surplus. Okay, so in an imperfect market, you're going to have barriers to entry. You're going to have asymmetric information. Okay, so let's also go further to another cause of environmental degradation: foreign indebtedness. To repay debt, the representatives of developing countries would not mind exploiting their resources to the detriment of the society. Okay, they would also not mind selling these natural resources at ridiculous prices because of their immediate need to finance government projects and self-corrupt practices. Okay, and self-corrupt practices. So what are some of the policies for sustainable development? What are some of the policies? One of them is reducing poverty. Or if we say reducing poverty, we can also say creating prosperity. Okay? It's not just enough to eliminate or eradicate or reduce poverty. We also need to find a way to create the prosperity for our people. This can begin with greater employment opportunities for the poor. In addition, basic amenities such as healthcare, education, electricity, clean water, sanitation should be provided. I mentioned in economic development, these are not negotiable. Electricity is not negotiable. Quality education is not negotiable. Healthcare, the provision of healthcare, quality healthcare facilities is not negotiable. Clean water is not negotiable, and sanitation is not negotiable. Those are the basics that should be available in any given country. As long as if the country is not in war, or if you don't have, if the country is not in war, what is stopping different country leaders from providing? All right, there are so many factors responsible for that, I know. But leaders must try They must try to ensure that these basic amenities are provided. Okay, what are some of the factors that is leading to the migration of people from one country to another? I mean, every migration of people from countries to another, because these things are not available. If they are available, people will stay in their country. They might go on vacation, they might go to other countries to learn, which is good because that's a form of education, but they're going to come back to their country because they know that their life, uh, uh, it, these basic amenities are protected, which in turn could increase their life expectancy, by the way. Removing subsidies. Removing subsidies on environmentally unfriendly products. Okay? So if a country notices that, let me give you an example. Maybe the importation of used cars that are exceeded or have failed some checks. So if someone is importing a car into the country, you need to take a look at the car. What are the kilometers? What are the what kind of car is it? Okay, so what kind of car is it? So if a country keeps um, a line for the importation of cars, and those cars emit a lot of emissions, then that is part of the problem. Okay, that is part of the problem. So removing subsidies on environmental or friendly products can be a good sustainable development policy for creating a quality environment. Now, I just used cars as an example, all right? Ensuring property rights. How lands and properties are used is meant to be clarified by the necessary authorities. Without these clarifications, natural resources could be used excessively. And so now, in some developing countries, you find out that a lot of deforestations are going on. Why? So that they can build houses. But the government has to be clear about areas that should not be touched, areas that are meant for maybe the areas where the trees should be preserved. I'm sure in some countries you can't just go into the forest to cut down trees. That could be against the law. So the developing countries should also have laws in such a way that people can't just go about clearing down trees because they want to build houses. There should be specific areas marked for trees, so that there could be a balance. There could be an ecological balance in the ecosystem. All right. Market-based approaches. There is a need for the adoption of market-based approaches to protect the environment. They aim to point to consumers and industries about the cost of degrading the environment. The costs are reflected in the prices paid for goods and services, so that industry and ultimately consumers are guided by them to reduce air and water pollution. An example of market-based approach are environmental taxes, okay, pollution charges. Okay, so market-based approaches relates to using price mechanisms, okay, to improve the quality of the environment, using price mechanisms to improve the quality of the environment. So we also have regulatory policies. Regulatory policies determine to what extent the environment will be degraded. Suppose the leaders or representatives of a country see environmental degradation as an immediate threat to the ecosystem. In that case, policies will be created in that direction, enabling the producers and consumers to follow suit. Okay, the government of a country or the stakeholders will determine the direction. If the country is going to engage in sustainable practices, okay, policies will decide that. Economic incentives. Economic incentives include tax incentives, subsidies, price mechanisms, grants and rebates, etc. Economic incentives are made available through government policies. Trade policy. I said this can be domestic or international. Domestic trade policies include the establishment of polluting industry away from the cities and using environmental friendly processes by adopting cleaner technology. For international trade, goods coming into the country should be environmentally friendly. Heavy fines should be placed on heavy fines or heavy taxes or heavy tariffs should be placed on goods or products that cause environmental pollution. So I gave you an example as regards to the cars coming into a country which still create used cars, which still creates a lot of environmental pollution. So public participation. This can be achieved through education. This means sensitizing people about the importance of a clean environment. Data should be constantly made available to the public so that improvements can be measured. So if people have been educated, they can then go ahead to look at data to measure what has been the progress. Okay? So by educating people about the importance of practicing, of engaging in sustainable practices, that will go a long way in a country achieving its climate goals, for example. All right, so public participation can be encouraged through the channel of education or training. Okay, so when people are educated, they can be able to read data. All right, you can also find, I said, in addition, unbiased data should be made available to scientists for empirical investigation. Okay, because it is this empirical investigation that will churn out results. All right, and if people are being educated, of course, they can be able to take a look at written pieces and read them and go through the result and measure the progress. Participation in global environmental efforts. Joining the rest of the world to reduce emissions and working very hard at achieving its climate goals. All right, so we already know, we already have an idea of the sustainable development goals, which we'll take a look at the end of this lecture. But it's a global goal. Each countries have their individual goals, but it is a global responsibility to ensure that we create a safer environment for ourselves. And that comes by engaging in sustainable practices. So how do we measure sustainable development? What are those things we're going to take a look at to know if a country is engaging in sustainable practices? We can take a look at the natural capital stock. The natural capital stock includes soil fertility, fisheries, the capacity to assimilate waste, oil, gas, coal, the ozone layer, the biological cycle. The necessary condition for sustainable development is that natural capital stock should be conserved and improved. You remember, by engaging in by carrying out economic activities, we should not be destroying our capital stock. We should be conserving it, preserving it, or improving it. Now, this can be measured in terms of cost-benefit analysis of changes in the natural capital stock. Thus, sustainability is consistent with maintaining and improving natural capital assets. Natural resources and green accounting. This relates to the computation of income for a nation by taking into account the economic damage and depletion of natural resources, natural resource base of an economy. It is the measure of sustainable income that can be secured without decreasing the stock of natural assets. So an economy can grow. An economy can engage in production of goods and services, and at the same time is able to preserve its natural assets. Okay? Is able to preserve its natural assets. Okay? Measuring environmental values. This relates to comparing the benefits of the protection with the cost incurred in it. The World Development Report 1992 suggests the following 4 approaches for economic valuation of environmental damage. 1, market prices. 2, cost of replacement. 3, surrogate markets. What do we mean by surrogate markets? The surrogate markets are used to estimate the economic value of environmental goods and services that do not have direct market prices, such as clean air, biodiversity, scenic views, and number 4, surveys. We also have social discount rate. This relates to measuring cost and benefit of environmental effect on the present and future generations. So I'm sure you've heard about the Sustainable Development Goals. All right. So these goals are the problems global economies are trying to solve. They are the problems global economies are trying to solve. So you have, I said, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future. At its heart are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are an urgent call for action by all countries, developed and developing, in a global partnership. They recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations must go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, support economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. Okay? So, in summary, as countries go about their daily activities, or as countries go about producing, consuming, interacting, exporting, importing, they have to ensure that their practices are sustainable. They have to ensure that their practices are contributing to the global environmental quality. Okay? Why? Because it has a very significant impact on the ecosystem. All right? So remember to share this with your students. Feel free to ask me questions in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. All right? Do have a wonderful day, guys. Have a wonderful day.